In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about why you should not ignore a problem in your life.
So then you might say, well, you have a 3-year-old child and maybe they're having a hard time going to sleep because it's dark. And fear of the dark is actually an emergent phenomena. So as the child's fear system develops, as the child becomes more and more ambulatory and needs to be protected from the consequences of wandering off unattended, the fear systems also come online. And what do? They populate the darkness with monsters. Now you might say, you go into your child's room and they say, well, you know, there's a monster in the dark. And you say, well, there's no such thing as monsters. And then you think, really? There's no such thing as monsters. You know, that's why people are terrified to let their children walk 3 blocks to school. Because there's no such thing as monsters. It's like there are plenty of monsters. And you might say, well, there aren't monsters like dragons. And then I might say, well, what makes you so sure of that? Why is that a bad classification heading? You know, if you're talking about the class of all dangerous things that lurk in the darkness, let's say, because that is a good place for the class of all dangerous things to lurk, how better to represent it than in monstrous form? Because the monstrous form takes pieces from all the potential dangers and amalgamates them into a single danger and says, look out. Wander into the domains that you don't understand at your peril. Well, that's not fake. It's not false. It's real. You know, and children are small and edible. And they've been that way throughout history. And you know, children who wandered too far away from the campfire were going to get hurt. And so the idea that there aren't dragons, for example, there aren't monsters, that's not a good idea. It's not the right approach. I remember once, this may only seem peripherally related, but it's integrally related. One time, I remember my daughter, when she was about 3, or thereabouts, she came to talk to my wife and I in the morning, and she said she had a nightmare, and the nightmare was she'd seen this clear stream running through, sounds like an environmentalist fairy tale. She saw this clear stream running through a forest and there was garbage in it. And when she saw the garbage in it, you know, she was upset about it, and then she came into our room and she said that this was upsetting and that why was there garbage in the stream. And one response to that is, you know, don't worry about it, it was just a dream. And the other response is, well, what would you do if you came upon a situation like that? And so we asked her that, and she said, well, maybe I could take the garbage out of the stream. And so I said, well, you close your eyes and just imagine that, you know, you take the garbage out of the stream and maybe you go put it in a garbage can, and then that's the end of the problem. So she was quite happy with that, and then she wandered off and went back to sleep. And that's a better answer than that was just a dream. You know, and I don't exactly know what you mean when you say that was just a dream anyways. Like, what the hell do you know about dreams? You know, I mean, really, everything in the world emerges as a dream. And you don't understand dreams at all. You go to sleep and they happen to you. You don't control them. They're phenomena of nature. So what are you going to say? That was nothing? It's like, yeah, sure, it's not nothing. Well, that's her position. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Billy's mother. And she said it like she meant it. That's a person who does not want to admit to the existence of chaos and disorder, or who wants to protect her child from that. And you know, there's some utility in that, because children have a limited capacity to deal with chaos and disorder, but to deny its existence in their presence is the wrong thing to do. First of all, you give them the wrong idea about the nature of the world. Second, you're implicitly telling the child that there are certain elements of reality that have to be hidden from them, because they're either so overwhelming that no one can deal with them, or that the child is so useless that the child can't deal with them. That's not the right message to give your children. The right message is, there are dragons, but if you're careful, you can learn how to deal with them, and we'll help. So it's like Oedipal mother mistake number 1. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail. So it's looking for attention, right? There's something in the household that's looking for attention, and people are ignoring it. Now, I don't know how many households you've walked into where that's the case. I mean, I don't know. It's endemic among households where there's a number of things that are demanding attention, and no one's paying attention to them. There are things that you don't talk about, or there are things that you have to pretend not to notice, and everyone walks around on eggshells or on the elephants underneath the carpet pretending that everything's alright, and there's nothing that's alright in the household at all. And so people in a situation like that are denying the reality of their own, not of their own senses, but of something even deeper than that. They're denying the reality of the importance that their own nervous systems are signaling to them constantly. It's something's up here, something's up here, something's not good, it should be attended to. It's like, no, everything's okay, we don't talk about that sort of thing. It's like, that won't make it go away. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on its head. It's a reasonable proposition. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Well, so that's interesting. So for some reason, the dragon is now growing. Now we don't really know why it's growing. So that's another mystery that's popped up in the middle of the narrative. You know, we might infer, well, we won't infer anything. It's foreshadowing the fact that the dragon is growing. And the idea there's something like a hint of an idea that if something surprising attracts your attention and you don't attend to it, then it has the probability of expanding in size. And that's a very interesting thing, that idea. So I can give you an example of how that sort of thing can occur in your own life, and how your senses blind you to the reality of things. So let's say you get a bill from the tax department and they say, well, you owe us $79.47, and so you think, well, what is that? And you think, well, that's a piece of paper. That's what you have in front of you, a piece of paper. So you crumple it up and you throw it in the garbage. And so then a month later you get another bill and it's like $95, and it's a little bit more insistent, and so you crumple that up and you throw it in the garbage, and you continue to do this, and what happens is that little thing that you're ignoring is going to aggregate monstrous qualities across time, and if you leave it long enough, then it's going to be something that you're really going to have to contend with. Like maybe it's something that destroys your credit history so that you don't get to have a mortgage on your house the first time that you try to buy a house. You know, or maybe you get tangled up with the tax department and they audit every income tax return you do for the rest of your life, which would make you miserable for about a month a year on a permanent basis for the next 50 years. So it's a strange thing, because you know, your senses seem to be designed to tell you what's immediately relevant in this immediate space, right now, here and now. And so you see things a certain way, but they're not really that way. And lots of things that seem relatively innocuous from an objective perspective have the capability of manifesting themselves in magnified proportions across time, and all you have to do in order to have that happen is just do nothing. They'll grow of their own accord if you don't attend to them. And pretty much all the real problems that you'll face in your life are going to be like that. There'll be things in your relationships, for example, that you think, well, I don't really have to attend to that. It's like, fine, you know, don't attend to it once you've been alerted to its existence, and see what happens. Well, and that's what this book is about.